Hello and welcome to this edition of Arirang News. It's great to have you with us live from Seoul. I am Kim Min-ji. South Korea's President Moon Jae-in has embarked on a three-nation tour that will take him to Brunei, Malaysia and Cambodia. Moon's first overseas trip this year is aimed at improving Seoul's relationship with the three ASEAN members, as well as promoting his new southern policy that seeks to boost economic and diplomatic ties with Southeast Asia. We'll have an expert in the studio later to discuss what to expect from the president's trip. But first, let's turn to Devin Whiting at Arirang's News Center for a look at the day's headlines. Devin.
I'm Minji. The top story this hour is former South Korean President Chun Doo-hwan in court to face charges of libel in defending the government's crackdown on pro-democracy activists. Almost 40 years ago, he's accused of defaming the dead. We understand that the former president has now left the court. Our Choi Si-young is standing by there in Gwangju. Si-young, what's the latest?
Well, Devin, the hearing itself seems to have ended, but President Chun Doo-hwan is still believed to be in the perimeter. Now, each side seems to have made their cases before the judge. And the eyes were on whether the court really checked to see if Chun Doo-hwan is really suffering from dementia. Now, that's because Chun Doo-hwan had refused to attend the hearing twice in the past, citing dementia and the flu. So at the hearing, Chun is joined by his lawyer and his wife, Lee Sun-ja. Only the audience of 103 people were allowed in the courtroom to watch the hearing in real time. Now, while the trial was ongoing, a number of protesters were still outside the courthouse demanding that Chun apologize for the crackdown against the Gwangju democracy movement.
If he had taken full responsibility for what had happened in Gwangju in 1980 and said sorry at the time, we wouldn't be having this chaos today.
If Chun appears before court today, I hope he delivers his apology to the people of Gwangju for the crackdown in 1980.
So, Si-young, can you tell us more about the charges themselves and what are the sticking points between former President Chun and the prosecutors?
Well, Chun is accused of writing false accounts of the May 18th pro-democracy movement in a memoir published in 2017. Now, in the memoir, he denied claims by the witness that the government used military choppers to shoot at protesters. Now, in doing so, he called the late activist and priest Cho Bi-ho, who said he saw the chopper attacks, a shameless liar. Now, that's defaming the dead, which is punishable by law under certain conditions here in South Korea. Chun Doo-hwan would be found guilty if the conditions are met. First, Chun's claim of no chopper attacks is shown to be false. And second, he knowingly made his claim even though it was aware that he was false. Now, for the first of those conditions, the prosecutor seems to have overwhelming evidence, confidential documents from the U.S. Embassy in South Korea, as well as the results of a probe by the country's defense ministry that all say the attacks did occur. So the main issue here is whether Chun intentionally made his claim even when he knew it's false. If found guilty, Chun Doo-hwan will be serving up to 2 years in prison or pay a maximum of roughly $5,000 in fines. That's all from me at this hour. Back to you, Devin.
All right, Choi Si-young live from the Gwangju District Court. Thank you very much for that. It sounds like we could be seeing former President Chun Doo-hwan coming out of there any minute now. We're watching the front of the Gwangju District Court, where the former president, accused of defaming a priest with the false claim, it's alleged, that the helicopter attacks on Gwangju civilians did not occur when there appears to be much evidence, and it's widely understood that the attacks did occur. And he has long been due in court to face these charges, and finally now, today, he has appeared. And there, the streets are lined with police waiting for Chun to be escorted away from the court. In other news, South Korean President Moon Jae-in met with the Sultan of Brunei on Monday in Brunei, and the two have agreed to work to create synergy in their countries' respective policies. They decided to come up with reciprocal measures that'll help improve people's lives under Korea's new Southern policy and Brunei's Vision 2035. Korea's new Southern policy aims to add more diversity to its diplomacy, while Brunei's Vision 2035 hopes to raise foreign investment and contribute to the country's long-term economic growth and social development. The leaders also agreed to work together to promote bilateral cooperation in the areas of intellectual property and technology, while doing more to help both countries find new growth engines. U.S. intelligence agencies have spotted signs that North Korea continued to develop its nuclear and missile programs after the first summit with the U.S. last year in Singapore. According to the New York Times on Sunday, intelligence officials say since that time, the regime has developed enough uranium and plutonium to produce about 6 nuclear weapons. U.S. President Donald Trump is said to have been briefed on the assessments. The report also says the North is maintaining most of its facilities at the Seohae Satellite Launching Station in Dongchang-ni and the Punggye-ri nuclear test site. The apparent missile activity in the North raises the prospect of more missile launches, something President Trump says, according to his national security advisor John Bolton, he would find disappointing. Lee Seung-jae has this report.
Speaking to ABC's This Week regarding reports North Korea is continuing work on its missile testing site, U.S. National Security Advisor John Bolton said there's a lot of activity all the time in North Korea, and that nothing in the proliferation game surprises him anymore. Bolton added that President Trump would be, quote, pretty disappointed if North Korean leader Kim Jong-un broke his promise and went ahead with missile launches.
Well, as the president said, he'd be pretty disappointed if Kim Jong-un went ahead and did something like that. The president said repeatedly that he feels the absence of nuclear tests, the absence of ballistic missile launches is a positive sign. And he's used that really as part of his effort to persuade Kim Jong-un that he has to go for what the president called the big deal, complete denuclearization.
Last Friday, President Trump told reporters that his relationship with the North Korean leader was still a very good one, and added he would be surprised in a negative way if he did anything that was not per their understanding. However, Bolton struck a more cautious tone, saying one mistake previous U.S. administrations made was assuming North Korea would comply when they undertake obligations. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
Now, South Korea's National Security Council is communicating closely with its American counterpart when it comes to North Korea issues, especially regarding the apparent construction taking place at the Dongchang-ni missile launch site. The Blue House texted a statement to that effect to the local press corps on Monday when asked about a possible phone conversation between President Moon's top security advisor, Chung Eui-yong, and his American counterpart, John Bolton. The two are expected to talk over the phone this afternoon. Bolton had said on Sunday that he planned to discuss reports of that activity in the North with his South Korean counterpart in the near future. The U.S. and China have been trying to hammer out a deal to end their trade war. They've postponed a deadline after which, without a deal, there would have been more tariffs. Over the weekend, both sides were sounding optimistic, as our Kim Hae-sung reports.
White House economic advisor Larry Kudlow insists the Trump administration is making headway in its trade negotiations with China. In an interview with Fox News on Sunday, Kudlow said he remains bullish on the prospect of a U.S.-China trade deal being finalized sometime in April, brushing off reports suggesting lower prospects for a deal and pushback from Beijing. Kudlow also downplayed a report that Chinese President Xi Jinping canceled plans to meet President Trump at Mar-a-Lago in Florida, saying there can't be a cancellation of something that wasn't scheduled. Washington and Beijing have been locked in an escalating trade war for months, levying billions of dollars in tit-for-tat duties on each other's products. Following high-level talks in Washington late last month, the two sides agreed to delay a March 1st deadline to impose additional tariffs on Chinese goods and have been hammering out a trade deal that addresses market access, tech transfers, and intellectual property rights. Over the weekend, the governor of People's Bank of China, Yi Gang, who has been part of the trade talks, said the U.S. and China have reached consensus on many crucial issues, including currency.
China will absolutely not use the exchange rate to boost its exports. Nor will the country use exchange rates as a tool in trade frictions, which we've promised not to do.
China's Commerce Minister Wang Shouwen also said the two sides are working day and night to reach a compromise. While striking an optimistic tone, he said any deal achieved must be equal and fair and all tariffs must be removed by both sides. Experts say how the two sides agree on tech transfers and make the deal enforceable will be key. 김혜성, Arirang News.
I'm Devin Whiting, and those are your news headlines.
The leaders of Korea and Brunei have agreed to take their partnership to another level, signing a deal on Monday after their bilateral summit in Brunei's capital. From construction to patents, their promise of bilateral cooperation is seen as a move that will help build the president's new southern policy. Shin Se-min reports from Brunei.
Different methods, but a similar purpose. President Moon Jae-in and the Sultan of Brunei, Hassan al-Bolkiah, have promised to step up substantive bilateral cooperation and achieve synergy in the pursuit of their countries' respective policies, Korea's new southern policy and Brunei's Vision 2035. Acknowledging that both policies focus on improving people's lives, the leaders Moon and Bolkiah agreed to come up with measures that are reciprocal and complementary.
나는 사람 중심의 평화와 번영의 공동체를 만들고자 하는 우리의 신남방 정책과 브루나이의 비전 2035 전략이 조화롭게 추진되어 기계의 신기술, 신산업 분야까지 협력을 넓히고 공동 번영을 함께 이뤄나가길 기대합니다.
Korea's new southern policy aims to diversify its diplomacy, adding to its traditional trade partners, the U.S. and China. And Brunei's Vision 2035 hopes to drive up foreign investment and contribute towards the country's long-term economic growth and social development. On economic cooperation, the leaders decided to do more in the infrastructure and energy sectors. That includes building a value chain in liquefied natural gas spanning from gas mine development to shipping and sales. And the leaders also agreed to promote bilateral cooperation in areas of intellectual property, science and technology, and to expand their joint search for new growth engines. On a more social level, the leaders have agreed to add more direct flights to boost people-to-people exchanges. And the leader of Brunei says the timing could not be better.
Not only are we marking 35 years of diplomatic ties, in terms of Korea-ASEAN relations, Brunei is a coordinator between the two parties.
With Brunei to help with the hosting of a special South Korea-ASEAN summit in Seoul this year, something that'll help establish future relations between the two sides, the leaders agreed to consult closely going forward. And speaking on the president's push for peace on the Korean peninsula, the South Korean leaders stressed the importance of all 10 ASEAN member nations in helping North Korea give up its nuclear ambitions through their own diplomatic relations with Pyongyang. And the Sultan of Brunei, a window for dialogue between Korea and ASEAN, did express his support in establishing permanent peace on the Korean peninsula. Shin Se-min, Arirang News, Bandar Seri Begawan.
And for more, we have Professor Shin Sang-yeop from Kyunghee University joining me in the studio today. Welcome to the program.
Yeah, pleased to be here today.
So the president's trip comes at a time when the Hanoi summit between Washington and Pyongyang fell through. So it seems that the political and economic importance of Southeast Asia will become greater. How do you see the president's choice of countries for his first overseas trip of the year?
Well, I think he made a very good decision. I think considering the objectives of his visit to the 3 Asian member countries, I think it was a good decision. If I added up, excuse me, the economic reasons, right now the trade war between USA and China is going on. And these two countries have been two main destinations of Korean exports. Also, they have been the two main the places where we imported the products. So they have been the two main trade partners for the Korean economy. But because of the ongoing trade war between two countries, definitely we are facing the crisis in our trade. In this context, the diversification of trade relations needed. And then the ASEAN is really one of the most appropriate trading partner for diversification of our Korean and the economy's trade relations. You know, last year, I mean, as of the end of 2018, the trade volume with the ASEAN raised up to $160 billion, which is the second largest one. So definitely the visit to these three ASEAN member countries seems to be very important for further cooperation, I mean economic cooperation with the ASEAN member countries. Second one is political reasons, you know. After the Hanoi summit
Okay, I'm sorry to cut you off for a second, but we're getting live footage from former President Chun Doo-hwan leaving the Gwangju District Court after his libel case. So what you're seeing now is footage of the former president leaving the Gwangju District Court. Now, he had made his way to Gwangju this morning from his home in Seoul, and his libel case lasted for approximately 76 minutes. It started at 2:30 p.m. local time today, this afternoon, and we can see him leaving. Now, we can see that he's having trouble getting into his vehicle. There must be a lot of protesters and reporters on the scene. So he has faced charges of defaming a former late priest known by his Catholic name of Cho Bi-oh. In his memoir that he wrote in 2017, he called the former priest a Satan in a mask and a shameless liar because the priest during his lifetime had made remarks that he had seen helicopter attacks on civilians during the 1980 pro-democracy movement. But Chun had denied those claims flatly in his memoir, and this is the case. If convicted, Chun can face up to 2 years in prison or approximately $4,400 in fine. Okay, my apologies for that. So back to the president's trip. So the president's overseas trip will definitely be an opportunity to accelerate the new Southern policy and diversify Korea's export partners, like you said. Now, for our international viewers who may be unfamiliar with the term, could you describe to us what the new Southern policy is?
I mean, before answering your second question, let me very briefly explain the political significance of his visit to three Asian member countries. Politically, after Hanoi summit between American President Mr. Trump and then North Korean leader Kim Jong-un, well, in fact, through the visit to these three ASEAN member countries, President Moon could gather the support from these three ASEAN member countries for his push for the peace settlement of the Korean Peninsula. And these, all 10 ASEAN member countries have diplomatic relations with the North Korea. Considering this aspect, definitely his visit to the three ASEAN member countries can contribute to solving the North Korean denuclearization issue. Well, this is the second political reasons why his decision was quite good. And then to answer your question, then, the new Southern policy, which is one of the most important foreign policy initiatives launched by President Moon Jae-in, and it aims to reinforce his cooperation, his Southern policy in order to further develop and widen the economic cooperations, the political cooperations with the ASEAN member countries. So I think it is very important, and if I had more information and explanation to diversify the Korean trade relations, it seems to be very important for the future Korean economic development. As I already explained, Korean economic structure has been excessively relied on the foreign trade, and then in the foreign trade, the Korea has excessively relied on the trade with the USA and China. So the diversification with the more countries seems to be very important. We can be a kind of stepping stone for the future, more stable economic development for Korea. So in this context, as I said before, the new northern policy seems to be very important economic policy for the Korean economy.
So a lot of opportunities there. The first leg of President Moon's trip takes him to Brunei. Now this year also marks the 35th anniversary of diplomatic relations between the two. Now Brunei also serves as the coordinator for South Korean ASEAN dialogue. And the two sides agreed on Monday to expand cooperation and partnership. What do those entail?
Well, in fact, through his visit, President Moon Jae-in and his counterpart in Brunei could deepen and widen the bilateral cooperation in the fields, and particularly in the energy industrial sector and the construction of infrastructure. As you know very well, Brunei has abundant natural resources such as gas and oil. So from the developing these oil well and then the processing the oils for the final consumers, all those processes are needed high technologies, and Korea could participate in those kind of projects. And also the Korean government could discuss further how to work together to develop the Brunei patent system. So this could be the subject on the talks between two leaders in Brunei.
So after the president wraps up his trip to Brunei, he will head to Malaysia, which has had diplomatic relations with Seoul for almost 60 years now. Now, Malaysia is also one of the biggest consumers of South Korea's Hallyu content. Now, here, President Moon will sit down for a summit with the King and Prime Minister. What sort of economic cooperation do you
Malaysia is one of the industrialized economy among 10 ASEAN member countries, which means they have high technologies and to some high technologies. So to discuss about the how to cooperate in developing or sharing the high technologies between two governments, and so in other words, that maybe two leaders will discuss about the future-oriented partnership between two countries, and also they could discuss about the future technologies like the smart city project, something like that. So maybe the main topics at the talk between two leaders in Malaysia will be discuss about how to cooperate the science and high technologies between two countries.
And the last nation of his three-country tour will take the president to Cambodia. Now, the country has seen its economy grow more than 7% a year for the last 2 decades. Now, it's being considered a popular tourist destination and an attractive investment point for South Korea. What sort of economic advantages are we talking about?
Well, as you pointed out, Malaysia is emerging as one of the very famous destinations of the tourists. And then also Malaysia has been one of the most favorable places in which foreign investors want to make foreign direct investment into, because they have relatively good quality labor forces at the cheaper prices. And the government, Malaysian government has provided various incentives to attract foreign direct investments. So on the part of the Korean industries seeking for appropriate destination of their foreign direct investment, Malaysia is one of the most appropriate places for the FDI, foreign direct investment. So the Malaysia are, the President and Moon Jae-in and Malaysian counterpart will discuss about how to develop and promote the mutual investment, particularly investment from Korea. And then Malaysia has comparative advantages in agricultural sector. So maybe it can be one of the industries which two countries could work together to develop this industrial sector. Also, Malaysia has very aggressively, recently the Cambodian government has developed many infrastructure. So there must be some potential market for Korean construction companies to participate in this project, construction projects.
So through the president's new southern policy, the country is seeking to diversify its export market that has been heavily reliant on the U.S. and China. Now, bilateral trade between South Korea and ASEAN, like you mentioned previously, had hit a record high of $160 billion last year. Now, Seoul wants to expand that figure to $200 billion by 2020 under this new policy. It must make this trip extra important. What's your take?
Well, I think the President Moon Jae-in, when he was the presidential candidate, he emphasized that the economic cooperation with the ASEAN member countries should be important as much as the importance with the so-called four major the countries neighboring the Korean Peninsula. They are the Russia, Japan, China, and USA. So to diversify trade relations and to increase their trade volume with the ASEAN member countries, definitely this visit to three ASEAN member countries can be a stepping stone for the future economic cooperation with ASEAN member countries. I think we have to interpret this visit to the three ASEAN member countries in this context.
Just before we let you go, do you see any tasks ahead when he's implementing this new policy?
Well, certainly to have a very successful outcome in the new third policy, definitely we have to build the fundamentals for future cooperation between South Korea and the ASEAN member countries. What I mean is, by promoting exchange of the human resources, we have to expand and then deepen the mutual understanding between Korea and ASEAN member countries. Based on the mutual understanding between two countries, they should have to make every effort to develop promote the quality and quantity of the relations between Korea and the ASEAN member countries, which will be quite different from the previous policies taken by the Korean government. In the past, we thought that the ASEAN is just about some potential trade partners or not very big potential trade partners for the Korean economy. But right now, everything has been changed. So with the different perspectives, with the different approaches toward ASEAN member countries, Korean government should have developed and implement the policies very continuously. I think that will be the way for us to have the very successful outcomes in the new Southern policy, I think.
So hopefully the president's trip will bear some fruitful outcomes this time.
So.
Thank you very much for your insights.
My pleasure.
And that's where we wrap things up today. Join us again tomorrow at the same time, but in the meantime, stay tuned to Arirang News for all the latest updates. Thank you for watching and goodbye.
Jeonju holds the key to Korea's past. The rooftops of the traditional houses with their delightful tiles and piled up over the unpainted light pine wood of the exterior are captivating. And you must experience a traditional meal with dozens of small dishes spread out on a polished wood table featuring local delicacies. In fact, UNESCO has recognized the unique features of Jeonju's diverse cuisine. The delicate wooden walls and low stone walls of traditional houses blend harmoniously together with modern architecture. Traditional Village has a variety of exciting events all year round that allow you to experience Korea's depth and breadth. Come to Jeonju and feel yourself the cool mountain breezes and dip your feet in the clear streams of the old town. Enjoy the polite service of the hosts at your local inn, where they wear traditional hanbok and treat you with great kindness.